Partnerships in Progress, Community-Based Collaborations for Environmental Justice in Portland, Oregon. A little brief overview of the Access and Awareness webinar series. The webinar series aims to provide public access to interagency working group and increase awareness of the federal agency strategies, programs, and holistic community-based solutions to address environmental justice issues. The series also works to foster a deeper understanding of what resources are available to anyone interested in improving the health, quality of life, and economic opportunities in overburdened communities. If at any point during the presentation you have questions, please type them into the question and answer box on the middle left-hand side of the webinar room on your screen. There will also be time after each presentation to ask your questions until we get, with that, I'm going to pass it over to Mary Lou Socha from EPA's Region 10 to start us off.
Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. Can everybody hear me? Am I coming in okay? Joe and Janine?
Loud and clear.
Okay, great. I'll just go ahead and start. Hi, everybody. It's so nice to talk to everybody today in this virtual conversation. And what we're going to do today is we're going to share some really amazing work that's been happening over approximately the past 2 years and also built upon work that others have been doing a long time before that. So we're going to talk about a community-based collaboration in Portland, Oregon that was established to address environmental justice problems. And I'm going to be accompanied by some really amazing community leaders that I've had the incredible honor and privilege to work with. Duran Coles from the Blueprint Foundation, Bobby Cochran from Willamette Partnership, Mary Pivoto from Neighbors for Clean Air, and John Vasutinsky and Tim Lynch from the Multnomah County Office of Sustainable Development. Okay, this one. Okay, so we're going to talk about, in this work, this is built upon some work that EPA has been doing, and it's a cross-agency priority that is focused on community-based work. We created this program to work across programs with EPA programs to provide targeted technical expertise to about 30 to 50 environmentally overburdened and economically distressed communities throughout the country, where our goal was to look at our own EPA programs and other federal agencies and then work with people at the community level to improve how we work together to support community needs. And then our hope is that as we learn lessons from this work, we will use these lessons to help more communities in the future, work, community-based work. So, whoops, getting used to this equipment here, guys. Let me go back one slide. So just to give an overview, for EPA Region 10, which folks may know is Alaska, Oregon, Washington, and Idaho, we have 5 community-based work efforts that we started in about 2015. There's a work effort in Nampa, Idaho that is involved in engaging the Hispanic community in stormwater and watershed management, a work effort to address tribal asthma and healthy homes in Washington, and that's working with tribal communities to provide in-home intervention for asthma. In Bremerton, Washington, EPA has been doing some work with low-income communities to revitalize them for environmental, economic, and health benefits. In Alaska Native Villages, we've been working with 3 select communities to identify strategies for climate change adaptation. And then our work in Portland, Oregon that we're going to go through in more detail. So our Portland, Oregon work was a community-based collaboration that we convened in 2015. We established a steering committee, and we had the people from the community. Each meeting had a community led a person, 2 community people to facilitate those meetings. What came out of our work over a period of months and conversations, we came up with 4 priorities that we're going to talk in more detail about. we came up with a focus on equitable development in East Multnomah County and East Portland, and a workshop was held in March 2016, and John Vasutinsky is going to talk about that work. We came up with a focus on air environmental justice and the need to focus on low-income communities in reference to clean air issues, and we had a workshop on that in March of 2017, and Mary Peavitt is going to talk about that work. And then we came up, and then we had EPA is going to be providing, or is providing right now, green infrastructure technical assistance to the Jade District, and Tim Lynch from Multnomah County is going to talk about that work. And then a Green Jobs Academy, where folks are working right now to try and establish green jobs. And all of this, the overall framework of all of this work is health and nature, and how do we have better access to nature that can improve public health, whether it's clean air or clean water or whatever. So that is an overall theme, and Bobby Cochran from the Willamette Partnership is going to talk about that. We also did some work on citizen science and mapping. ORD did some mapping, Office of Research and Development for EPA did some mapping of the Portland area, and those maps are a really important database. So our steering committee meetings, we had them about bi-monthly. We, as I said, they were co-facilitated. We used them as a chance to have updates and networking. We brought in people from the community to give presentations on various work. Then we had breakout sessions on each of our 4 focus areas. And then of note is that the EPA Urban Waters Program provided a small amount of funding that we used in a EPA facilitation contract, and Triangle Associates helped facilitate those meetings. I want to point you out on this slide. One of our great meetings was held at a brownfield site, the Dharma Zen Center, and at the very top, the top of the slide, the top corner, you can see there's a hawk being released. And so Audubon decided as a part of our meeting to come early and release this hawk that had been injured at the near the Portland airport. And so we all the people from the meeting gathered around, and there was a Montessori school nearby, and those children gathered around, and we watched the hawk release, and it was just such an incredible sort of, just an amazing way to start our meeting. And then I'm not going to go through all this, but this just gives a sense. We have federal agencies, state agencies, a lot of local nonprofits, a lot of different folks. We had a lot of support from HUD, and they brought in a lot of their partners. And right now, obviously, Department of Interior with Allison and Brian, and also Forest Service has been really supportive in terms of federal agencies that we've been working with. But lots of support from Multnomah County and some incredible nonprofits, of which you're going to hear in this talk. One of the things, there's always kind of these things that happen that make you realize, oh my gosh, this is working. And there's a nonprofit in town, the Intertwine Alliance, where they met Duran Coles, who's going to be talking a little later on, from the Blueprint Foundation, through our work effort, and so there are all these connections that have occurred, and that's what we wanted to create. We wanted to create an opportunity for people to connect and share information, and then after that we saw amazing opportunities emerge. So as I mentioned, I'm going to let our folks, our incredible community leaders that we've been working with, talk about their work effort. And what we're going to do from a logistical perspective is that each person has about 7 minutes. It's kind of complicated getting all these people in here, but they all have so many wonderful things to say. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pause for a couple minutes and take a couple questions after each individual presentation. And then I'm counting on Joseph. He's going to be the timekeeper for each of the speakers, so he's going to help folks with each speaker. So I think that's it for me, and I'm just going to turn it over to Bobby Cochran to cover the health and nature piece.
Great, Mary Lou, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. So my name is Bobby Cochran. I'm Executive Director for Willamette Partnership and a Johnson Foundation Culture of Health Leader. We're a conservation organization that does work across the West, but have been really excited to be working with the Making a Visible Difference group, largely for some of the reasons that Mary Lou were talking about. Out in Northeast, East Portland, there's just a huge amount of need, both in terms of environment, poverty, displacement, a lot of other issues that we're dealing with, but there's also a lot of organizations doing really cool stuff. And so part of it is figuring out what an organizing frame or some of the organizing lenses might be. And one of those that we've talked about, and certainly us as Willamette Partnership have been working on, is really looking at health infrastructure as green infrastructure. So how can more time outdoors in greener spaces start to make a difference for our health? And can we measure that? And a big reason why we got interested in that was looking at data coming out from 2002 that your zip code determines 90% of your health and not your genetic code. And that in Oregon, if you're American Indian, African American, Latino, or you live anywhere in rural Oregon, you're likely to experience significantly more chronic disease. And in terms of what's driving healthcare costs in Oregon, particularly for our Medicaid population, it's chronic conditions, depression, access to culturally appropriate care, poverty, and social cohesion. So a lot of the issues that are really driving at looking at the social determinants of health, which talks about building healthier places, a lot of what the environmental justice community has been working on for a long time. And one of the things that we've been interested in is how can we start making the business case for why building healthy places is important for healthcare to be paying attention to. And in Oregon, if you look at all the hospitals in the Making a Visible Difference area, they spent $10 million in 2015 on community health programs to address diabetes, tackle mental health issues. But they spent $500 million overall on community benefit expenditures, which is something that nonprofit hospitals have to do. So right now they're spending less than 2% of all of their community benefit dollars on building healthier places and community health. How can we start making the case for why that number should increase to 10 or 20%? And so we've started to develop methodologies whereby we can look at community health needs, we can look at hospital and healthcare finance, and start to think differently about how some of those investments are made. And as an environmental organization, if you look at some of the work that Nature Conservancy had done about why people care about nature, they care about clean water, clean air, and natural places to play. Folks are telling you they care about their health in terms of how they care about the environment, so how can we use that as a stronger organizing frame? And you build on that a layer of evidence that's been emerging out of public health research, environmental health, that more time outdoors in green space can make better links to health. So you stand on top of that mountain, you raise your arms up, you feel that sense of awe. Well, Cal Berkeley's actually done studies to measure reductions in cortisol levels and other stress hormones. So we can actually start measuring improvements in mental health from those feelings of awe. Similarly, you look at green infrastructure investments, this picture in the middle, that are being made. Well, now we can actually measure the air quality improvements from some of those green infrastructure investments and tie that back to economic savings in terms of reduced chronic respiratory disease. And I think finally, in conversations with a lot of the community health workers that are really working with communities to improve overall health, there's a lot of interest in some of the basics around social cohesion as fundamental to mental health being fundamental to physical activity, and physical activity all adding up to a broader package of health. So how do you combine all these things together? And we know a lot, but there's some key things that we don't know. And I think nationally this is something we really need to figure out how to band together on, which is, is time out in wilderness the same as being under a street tree? Are there differential responses for a young Latina girl or an Asian American family out in nature? How often do we need to have green space? So answering some of those questions are going to be really important. And I think there's also enough to really take action. And one of the things that we've also been hearing from the community health leaders is that community leadership creates a sense of purpose. And so Oregon is 41st in the country, according to the Gallup Healthways Wellbeing Poll, in sense of purpose. So that's kind of folks' sense that they're waking up in the morning and they're part of something that's bigger than themselves. And just that sense of feeling like you have a purpose is huge for health. which is a lot about leadership and empowerment. And so applying an equity lens for all of our work is critical to how you get to health. You can't get health without health equity. Another thing that we've been learning is that access to safe, clean, green spaces is really about kind of mental and physical health benefits. So access to what we already have is important. And there's interest in how using health can change the infrastructure decisions that transportation or water utilities, stormwater utilities are making. And there's some great conversations in the region about tools that can support water, wastewater, and stormwater utility investments so that they're advancing health. And I think finally, the point I've been really trying to hammer home is kind of health can be an organizing frame to create broader tents. So we all care about our health, and how can that be a way for very disparate groups to come together and kind of work towards a common outcome and purpose? So I think I'll stop there. If folks want to learn more, Oregon.healthandoutdoors.org houses the Oregon Health and Outdoors Action Framework and some updates as we go along. But why don't I go ahead and stop there and see if folks have any questions.
Thanks. We actually have one question from the audience now, and that is, will this work continue if there is no federal support?
Yeah, so, I mean, if the Affordable Care Act, and particularly states that chose to expand Medicaid, was certainly important. I think there are a number of states, Oregon and Washington included, are pretty committed to continuing Medicaid expansion and to continue the work around social determinants. So yes, I think the work will continue. It'll certainly be hampered. I do think that if you talk to some of the Health and Human Services departments, there's a lot of interest in well-being and a lot of interest in the social determinants of health. So I think the work will continue in some form, but there's a lot of uncertainty, and anytime there's uncertainty, whether you're talking about Interior or EPA budgets or whether you're talking about Medicaid, people like to sit tight and not do anything while that uncertainty is out there. And I think there's just too much good work happening in communities and states to sit tight. We should keep moving.
We have another question here. Are you doing any outreach to minority communities or organizations?
I would say that for the Oregon Health and Outdoor Action Framework, and I think for the Making a Visible Difference, the principle is that communities should be leading, and particularly communities of color. Because if you're after health equity, you need to be looking at what the African American, Latino, American Indian, and rural Oregon communities are needing. So a big part of the overall initiative is to raise the funds that are, giving money to the community health workers and communities to drive what they think they need to better link health and the outdoors. So yes.
Great. And then as a final question, could you provide some more information on your equity labs and workshops?
Equity labs. I may have said equity lens. So in terms of some of the workshops that we've been doing, we just worked with the City of Seattle departments to do a training around health and nature and kind of how you can better link to healthcare and community health providers. And there's been just some amazing work going on in the Green Duwamish that you have community groups and city departments working together. And so, yeah, my email, I think, was on the front slide, and if anybody wants to follow up, just fire me an email, and I can send you more detailed information.
Great, thanks. And then for any questions that didn't get answered, we will be sure to follow up via email.
Perfect. And I think, John, I'll hand it over to you to talk about the good work that you're doing there at the county.
Great. Thank you so much, Bobby. It's really a huge asset to have the Willamette Partnership as a partner and really doing some groundbreaking work nationally as well as locally. We had technical assistance from the Environmental Protection Agency to conduct a equitable development workshop in Multnomah County. And with Mary Lou's help from EPA Region 10, we decided to focus on an area of the county where two cities, the city of Portland and the city of Gresham, kind of come together. And in that, and that was an intentional choice to think about, how are services coordinated or not coordinated across those two jurisdictions. We focused on, I'll get more into it as we kind of go into some of these maps in my next slides. But I just wanted to say that we identified some real pressures here. We have a booming real estate market, so displacement and increasing housing costs are a huge pressure on the community, and access to transportation and health and food access are all issues that were identified. So we were in these two neighborhoods called Rosewood and Rockwood. This is kind of a rough outline of the area, and right in the middle is a sort of dividing line between the city of Portland and the city of Gresham. It's a really, I'm just going to click back here because if you look on the right side, you can sort of see how this area stacks up in terms of the demographic makeup compared to the rest of the state. And you see that it's an extremely diverse area. There's at the local schools, there's upwards of 60 different languages spoken. So we have an area that's really diverse, but also economically marginalized. The equitable development workshop took place in two parts. We had a community workshop in one evening, and really the great thing about the partnership between EPA and the county was that the EPA was able to bring in the technical expertise from their contractor team, and the county was able to provide some of the things that make a community event successful, which is things like food and some nice prizes that community members could win as a result of their participation, and translation services so that anybody whose language was not English could participate in the event as well. The second part of the workshop took place the following day and was a practitioner workshop. And so we had representatives from all different branches of the federal government, thanks to EPA participation, but we also had folks from the city of Gresham, from the city of Portland, from our regional government, Metro, participate. So really a wide and diverse swath of folks, and also from nonprofit partners, participating in a day-long discussion. And we were able to take what we heard from the community and tailor our discussions that day to focus on those priorities that the community had identified. And these are a quick smattering of some of those areas that the community said we needed to work on. And I just want to highlight this. So one aspect of the technical assistance was that we did a lot of pre-work. Some of that pre-work was a desktop analysis to look at what available data existed for the demographic makeup of the area, but also to meet with community members and community-based organizations to plan for a successful event. This just shows density of communities of color. Again, I already mentioned that communities of color are very dense in the area where we focused our workshop on. we heard a lot before, during, and after about the intense displacement pressures. We've had a lot of displacement from the inner city core take place, and people are relocating to the area where this Rockwood-Rosewood area. But also we're even seeing that rents rising in this area and increased displacement pressure as a result. Transportation connections are not very good in this area. It's a kind of a hub and spoke model where we have transportation corridors that lead to the inner city. Sadly, we do not have transportation corridors that lead to job centers that are outside the urban core, particularly north-south transit connections. In addition, this area has been underinvested in basic infrastructure like sidewalks, paved streets, and bike facilities. In addition, and this was really thanks to some great work by the Office of Research from the EPA, this is an area with relatively low tree canopy cover, high urban heat island indexes. So it's an area that is suffering from sort of a disproportionate impacts of underinvestment. In addition, we saw, thanks to tools like EJ Screen, that exposure to particulate matter was higher in these neighborhoods. This is just an example of what the urban form is like in this area, where we have wide streets, narrow sidewalks, lack of public space, and really a surprisingly high density. So we have urban densities, but suburban form, which can lead to some real problems when it comes to moving around and having equitable access to services and resources. So I lost my screen here. Looks like it's booting back up. So as an outcome of the workshop, the team that the EPA brought in developed a next steps memo that highlighted these 4 areas with specific actions within each of the areas for different local actors to work on. And I'm happy to report that as a result of the workshop, we've really kind of galvanized around a couple of very specific projects. The county and our nonprofit tree planting partner, we've gotten funding to do tree planting within these neighborhoods, particularly in the city of Gresham, where the city of Gresham doesn't invest currently in tree planting. There's a lot of work being done, not so much by our office, but really by the counties and the cities, other departments within the county and the cities around housing affordability, with increasing dollars going towards housing and services. We are looking at opening, we're going to be opening a new community garden on June 24th in this neighborhood, in the Rockwood neighborhood, and we're looking at developing another community garden within the next year. And we're currently investigating repurposing some brownfield sites that are actually county owned, and thinking through how those can become community assets. So there's a lot of action going on, some of it being led by our office, some of it being supported by our office, some of it being led by others. But the really great thing about the assistance that we got from EPA was that it kind of brought all these various disparate efforts under one roof and gave people an opportunity to talk about how these problems interlock with one another and how solutions can be found if we are able to sort of work together in a collaborative way. I think that's my last slide. Yes, sorry, I'll flip back here. So that's my last slide. I went fast because Mary Lou told me I had to go fast, but I just wanted to, but I guess I'll take any questions that we have.
Thanks, John. I want to remind everyone that feel free to, at any time during the presentations, to type your questions into the question and answer box. As of right now, we don't have any questions, so if we want to move on, we can maybe circle back if questions do come in.
Great.
Great. Hello, everyone. This is Tim Lynch from the Multnomah County Office of Sustainability. I appreciate the introduction that my friends and colleagues have provided. I think it's a lot of context to the work that we're looking at doing in a neighborhood called the Jade District in Southeast Portland. So we are fortunate, the county, to receive technical assistance from EPA's Greening America's Communities program, which we're providing to APANO, the Asian Pacific American Network of Oregon, which oversees the Neighborhood Prosperity Initiative, local economic development activities in the Jade District. It's very similar to what's going on in the Rockwood neighborhood, and I think the slides that John presented, whoops, someone flipped me, that John presented, I think there's a similar story to be told around this community in terms of the pressures it's facing, particularly around housing and displacement. The Jade District has a census tract that's one of the most diverse in the state, with a very high concentration of API community members, which is why it was called the Jade District. So the Jade District's been in place as an economic development activity for, I think, 3 years, and on the bottom is one of their big success stories is the development of a night market in August, which has been very well attended both by community members but from people in the surrounding communities, and have really highlighted, I think, the rich cultural fabric that that exists in this community. And so what we're trying to achieve with the technical assistance is to address issues around green space and air quality and general livability, linking to traffic safety and some other issues that are acute in this community, while preserving that rich cultural fabric. The other thing I wanted to mention on this slide is that, so as part of the Greening America Cities technical assistance, a local design team was selected. And they're both local and culturally competent, and I think other communities that are looking to do similar work, I think that it's something you really want to take a close look at, that you can find folks that are practitioners that are highly skilled but also can really connect with the community as well. So as I mentioned, similar demographic and livability challenges exist in this community. At the top is a map that my colleagues in the health department put together looking at climate vulnerability countywide. It looks at a number of different indicators: age, health, race, poverty, urban heat islands, issues of air quality. There's actually a link you can see there if you want to go and browse through. It's an interactive map. They're doing amazing work around understanding specific community vulnerabilities to a changing climate. And so if you look at the Jade District, which is circled on the map, it ranks 100 out of 100 on that scale. So it's a highly vulnerable community from a lot of different perspectives, but climate included. I also included some of the information from the EJ screen, which I'll give a shout out to. I really appreciate that tool. It makes it really easy to take a quick snapshot around what particular environmental justice parameters exist in a neighborhood, and so I appreciate the folks that work to develop that. You keep that going. Other things to note about this area is it's park deficient. Within kind of the central core of this neighborhood, there's no park that's easily walkable for communities to get to. The community is surrounded by arterials on either side, so that also ties to the safety and the air quality issues. So the project, the design project, will look at several different sites in the community with the goal of developing some specific community visions that the community, APANO, and others can use as advocacy tools to really bring the investments that they want to see at a community scale and that are community-driven into these areas. So the design team's doing some initial design work and will host a 3-day design charrette in June that will include technical stakeholders from partner jurisdictions and other private folks who are invested in this community or have technical expertise. There'll be 2 culturally specific workshops with community members in language, so in Chinese and in Vietnamese, as well as some open houses for the general community, property owners, et cetera. So we're really excited to see what this process is going to look like on the ground. But So I put together a snapshot of some of the different sites that we'll be looking at. So on the upper left, you can see this is sort of right in the heart of this neighborhood. There's several underdeveloped lots that we are looking at repurposing for both park space and potentially for affordable housing. There's an adjacent existing stormwater site that we're looking to see how we can improve the aesthetics of the perimeter to really make it more in the context of the community and the neighborhood. On the bottom is a picture of the road that bisects those project sites on the graphic above, and I think it's more akin to a lunar moonscape than it is actually to a road, which is often the case in some of these neighborhoods in Southeast. It's actually where I live as well. So as part of the project, we'll be looking at improving the roadway to increase, community connections without adding a lot of additional traffic burden to the households that are living adjacent to these areas. And so how can you design roadways that might use alternative design standards that are more in the community context? On the right side is another project site at the Fubon Shopping Center, which is really a community asset. It's kind of a pan-Asian supermarket with lots of different small vendors as well as a large marketplace. So what we'll be looking at a few things, but what I highlighted here is there's a back entrance that's really a natural gateway to the surrounding community, but because the way it's developed, it's not very inviting. There's an opportunity for kind of a parklet or more of a gateway, which would allow pedestrian access to the shopping center as opposed to the current kind of car and auto-oriented configuration. And last, as I mentioned, there's major issues around safety and air quality. So the upper left is a street called Division, which has seen a number of fatalities, including just in December, a gentleman who was finishing his shift at one of the local Chinese restaurants was walking across not far from this pedestrian overcross and was struck, and actually someone else was struck on the same night further out on Division. So it's a major, major issue for the community. And you can see some of the relics of kind of old thinking around pedestrian safety, the overpass being, keep people away from cars, as opposed to really understanding this road flows through the middle of a vibrant community, lots of older adults, lots of children, and so rethinking kind of how we design a streetscape that promotes slower, more community-minded traffic flow. Another parklet in the upper right is potentially for park space. There's been some talk of having a food cart pod that's able to work with some of the local restaurants or aspiring restaurateurs, so both kind of cultural but also local economic development opportunity. On the bottom left is another arterial that is a relic. We call them orphan highways here. So it's a state highway that at one point was rural and is meant to move a lot of traffic. There's now an adjacent freeway that's on the other side of this community, and so it still carries a lot of traffic, but it doesn't fit at all with the fabric of this fast-growing community. And so looking at how we can develop a design framework from the community that can be used then as conversations move forward in the future around what the future of this highway may look like. The community can use that design work to really advocate for something that's context sensitive. So I don't know where I am on time. There's a lot to talk about here. We'll be working on the 3-day design charrette in June. After that, the design team will finish those pieces up, and we'll really move more towards an advocacy and partnership with community partners and others that are able and excited to invest in a community-led vision. And I think without the resources from EPA, this process would be years and years behind the curve, but having really something tangible to look at and hold is going to accelerate and really empower the community to make the changes that they want to see that can also preserve the existing cultural strengths and help organize against some of the pressures around anti-displacement. And I think I'll leave it there, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have, and I'm also happy there's a lot more information about this project in this neighborhood, the work that's happening. I'm also happy to talk offline with anyone who's interested.
Thanks, Tim. And as a reminder, folks can download the slides for today's presentation and any resources in the resources and material box at the bottom left corner of this webinar room. It looks like there aren't any questions at this time, so again, we'll just move forward here and then circle back if there are questions later on.
Great.
Find the questions as they come up. Oh, okay, go ahead. You're on. Yeah. Yeah, I just started that. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So this is Mary Pivotal. I'm with Neighbors for Clean Air, and I wanted to talk about the, is this our final or almost? Okay, focus area with the diesel and environmental justice workshop that was developed to address air quality. What we understand in Portland, Oregon, diesel emissions and air toxics disproportionately affect communities of color in Portland. And so because of that, and because that EPA, through their work in setting up this whole broader conversation and development of focus areas, had actually, the community groups themselves had identified diesel in the early, diesel and air pollution as concerns among the community-based groups. EPA knew that this was going to be a focus area of the work through the Making a Visible Difference planning group. So we wanted to develop, though it's complex. It's not as easy to address diesel as other types of air toxics, especially work that we have done. Neighbors for Clean Air has done a lot around industry emissions, which, as you know, stationary point sources tend to be while have their own issues to deal with, tend to be, you know, easier than the diffuse problem of diesel emissions across a wide area. And so we knew that we were going to have to get into some of the complexity of, you know, looking at issues of cumulative risk, the sort of hybrid structure of the governing laws and jurisdictions that different agencies and local decision-making entities have that can impact diesel emissions, and develop an opportunity for constructive engagement. And so finally, out of this, one of our outcomes was to develop a final report. And one of the big reasons for this was because our state has been working a lot on clean air and had developed a technical work group report on clean air just around industry emissions, and it felt like we really need to have a substantial report to look to also make sure that we weren't missing diesel and EJ issues. So just a little bit about Neighbors for Clean Air. We were founded in 2010, as I said, to address improve health. You know, I thought that Bobby did a really good job of talking about the when you put health as a lens around issues, even historical issues like air emissions regulations, I think it really changes the solutions and the pathways and the conversation quite a bit. We have been focused on this. You know, sometimes I call, you know, doing air quality work in Portland is sort of selling, you know, desert sand in the desert. Many people don't realize the problem that Portland, Oregon might have with air quality. But again, if you're looking at it through a health lens and you're looking at the highly localized impacts that air toxics, whether it's industrial emissions or something as ubiquitous as diesel, it becomes a whole different lens than air quality is generally measured by. And we have actually found that Portland, when you look at utilized EPA tools like the NADA data emissions and EJ Screen and other, you see that we actually do have some highly concentrated area of air toxics, hazardous air pollutants that aren't well addressed by federal programs and that the state hasn't really stepped in yet to address adequately to protect human health. And that's the area we've been focused on. So diesel, again, area we really quickly looked at diesel as being a problem besides just industrial pollution. So years ago, in fact, that was where our partnership with Multnomah County Office of Sustainability started, was work that we did together to really look at the widespread issue of diesel pollution across the Portland metro area. You can see by this type of map that it is widespread, and so it probably, everybody is impacted by this problem in the Portland metro area, but there are also, and just quickly, our issue is pretty much caused by what is, diesel pollution comes from, the non-road, the off-road. We do a lot of construction, development, infill in the Portland metro area, but we also are the main freight movement, geographic area of freight movement in our state, which happens to also be where we have our highest population density. So it's a tough juxtaposition between residents and typical sources of diesel pollution. But through Multnomah County's work and our partnership, Multnomah County in 2014 was the first entity to really look at how this was impacting some communities differently than others. And they did this through a report that they do with some regularity, their racial and ethnic disparities. But in 2014, Multnomah County added the exposure, diesel pollution exposure, based on all this good information and data that we had on diesel levels in the area. And they also determined that diesel pollution contributes to the 3 leading causes of death in the county. But DPM, the diesel particulate matter concentrations, are 2 to 3 times higher in neighborhoods with more low income and people of color. So we are finding, as I said, the issue was, we already saw was widespread, but we could also see these concentrations in environmental justice communities. And in these same EJ communities, not surprisingly, there are, we see higher rates of, diseases and health outcomes associated with air pollution like asthma. And we also know that then this links into a multi-level social determinant of health, things like school absenteeism and otherwise. So this was really helpful, I think, to help focus both the county but also other decision makers' attention around this issue. Another thing that happened besides the already the development within the EPA structure with MVD, the Making a Visible Difference steering committee, seeing diesel pollution and air pollution as a key area of concern for environmental justice communities. In 2016, we had sort of a grand awakening. So after being sort of a sole entity in Portland, working with some key partners to try and address toxics, we found suddenly in 2016, our air toxics problem was a national news story, and that was in the wake of utilizing some new. One of the problems with air pollution is it's really hard to measure. It's very expensive to measure. It's tough to put monitor where the air pollution is at any given time. And the U.S. Forest Service, with a very innovative project to look at moss as potentially a way to study and look at air pollution, actually released data demonstrating that we seem to have some really toxic hotspots in our city. And this was focused primarily on industrial metals. That was what the moss was, the best story the moss could tell. But I think the whole awakening and understanding of what we can't see in our air, what we haven't been measuring, what we don't see, was really beneficial, also background to bring more attention and resources, which the governor has done with a collaboration between our Oregon Health Authority and our Department of Environmental Quality called Cleaner Air Oregon. So this helped us bring some new emphasis to our workshop effort to ensure, though, that the state efforts address the toxic air pollution in the environmental justice communities, because the industrial pollution, surprisingly in Portland, Oregon, again, because of our progressive and creative land use, industrial pollution doesn't necessarily always impact low-income or environmental justice communities. But as I said, we certainly did realize that diesel pollution was disproportionately affecting folks. And through these industrial hotspots was a metric of understanding the relative risk. So people were really alarmed, for example, to learn that some of these heavy metals might put them at risk of being 30 to 50, 60 times over the acceptable risk level of cancer. And yet in these same areas, and certainly in EJ communities, with diesel, we might be looking at 100 times the acceptable risk level of cancer. So the relative proportionality of risk of what these toxics were, how they were impacting people. So with that in mind, our desire to ensure that the state was equitably addressing air toxics pollution within the EJ communities. What we realized, though, is there really was not shared literacy among both the community members. I think the Multnomah County, John Vashetinsky, talked somewhat about the work that they're doing in the East Multnomah County because of displacement issues. You can go back to the 90s and see EJ communities were dealing with diesel pollution in central core neighborhoods, and many of those communities have been displaced out of the central core. And so the issue has been really, there hasn't been a lot of continuity in addressing, and so I think the community needed to have better understanding, better tools, but also our local agencies, particularly our state agencies, have really been devastated by cutting of funding to our air quality program at our state level, and we really just have not had the ability to address the issue as strongly. So another big goal was to create an environment through this workshop where community members could come together with the federal, state, local agencies and really develop shared literacy around understanding how to prioritize the regional air quality issues and prioritize environmental justice concerns. And so we did that by gathering in a really fantastic space in East County in the Jade District. This is Apana's community space in the Jade District. We were able to bring in a whole bunch of people in a really interactive workshop format. This is a great space for this. We, did some of the usual things that I think, we're able through EPA funding and partner funding to be able to have food provided for the day. It was a day-long workshop. We were able to bring in some experts and then also provide translation services for different groups coming. So we had a really great mix and accessibility to a wide range of different people with different, coming from different places. Just to get into a few of the specifics, we had over 84 attendees. The community introductory speeches, I think, were probably one of the really key things. So again, we've talked a lot about, I think, addressing environmental justice and any community level problem. It's important for community to frame the conversation. And so we had some really outstanding speakers. Ben Duncan, who's the chair of Governor's EJ Task Force, has worked on the Portland Air Toxic Solutions. He's got deep history and knowledge of this issue. Tony DeFalco works with an organization, Living Cully, part of Verde, which is a strong Latino community-based organization in North Portland that has worked to address a very complex air quality problem. And Sophia Wilson, maybe one of my favorites. I've actually gotten to know her. She's a junior at Lincoln High School here in Portland in an area that has high pollution. And she, both with her work with Sisters of Color group and also a very innovative new class that's offered at Lincoln High School, the environmental justice class, has actually come. We've really worked with them to talk to them about how decisions and laws get made, and they've worked with us on talking to state legislators about diesel, potential bills and laws to address diesel pollution. And so she's had a lot of engagement in that work with us. And then finally, EPA's resources were able to bring in some of the leading experts in the places that we really needed to have expertise. Again, addressing cumulative risk is not easy. There aren't a ton of turnkey solutions in state regulations to show us how to do it, although there is a ton of great research in this area. So they brought in somebody from Minnesota, actually, that has one of the few cumulative risk requirements in state permitting. We also had great speakers on, building community capacity to advocate effectively in these really complex, highly technical areas. A group out of Minnesota as well, Center for Earth, Environment, and Democracy, that has done a lot of work with their local comprehensive plan, state or city comp planning process. And then also a really fabulous lineup of speakers from EJ department and other from the federal government who have worked with communities in really addressing EJ issues. So I think it was a fantastic lineup. Our next steps are the distribution of the report out of this. So we have, we took in all the information, and now again we are trying to develop a technical work report to come out of this that will help provide some guidance to state leaders as well as advocates on how best to address EJ in the new air toxics programs that are being developed by the state. NCA, our organization, will be working with EPA, DEQ. These are all the acronyms of our state agencies because there are going to be new rules coming out for the governor's program, Cleaner Air Oregon, and we want to ensure that environmental justice communities are well represented in participating in that public comment period. And right now, the state has been moving very fast on this track to get these rules out, and really, while they have a mandate to bring environmental justice voices to it, they have not really engaged too much yet, so we're working on that. And then finally, we are a recipient of Volkswagen settlement funds. We anticipate upwards to $80 million coming to Oregon, and we again want to make sure that we've set up a framework for the spending of that money where we know diesel reductions will be a big focus of that money being spent, and we want to make sure that the communities that are most impacted by diesel emissions are having a strong say in how that money will be spent in our state. And so we'll be working on that towards next year. So I think that's it. Anybody has any questions?
Thanks, Mary. We are having a little bit of technical difficulty right now. It seems that the question and answer box for the participants is not showing up correctly. So while we are trying to handle that on the back end, let's move on to the next presentation, and then we can take questions towards the end of the webinar.
Great. So thanks everyone for allowing, can everyone hear me?
You sound good.
Great. Thanks everyone for allowing me to be involved in this webinar today. I'm going to speak about 3 programs, so if you thought John was speaking quickly, buckle your seatbelt. These 3 programs were made possible by the wonderful work of the EPA in general and Mary Lou in particular, so I wanted to start by publicly thanking you, Mary Lou, for your efforts that led to these cross-sector collaborations. The first 2 programs are spearheaded by the Blueprint Foundation, which is a nonprofit in Portland that seeks to eliminate the opportunity gap for Black youth by engaging Black youth in culturally specific experiences that introduce them to and prepare them for family-sustaining careers in disciplines where Black identified individuals are currently underrepresented. The organization was founded by the Brothers of Historically Black Fraternity Phi Beta Sigma following 6 years of community service where the brothers implemented group mentoring for marginalized youth at Roosevelt High School in North Portland. Their efforts at Roosevelt led them to a partnership with Oregon State University where Black college students were trained to be near-peer mentors for the high school youth. The results were fantastic. For example, we had a 96% graduation rate with 78% of non-seniors on track to graduate compared to a 39% rate for their peers at the school at that time. Pre-post data also revealed that many of our students' career interests shifted to correlate with that of their mentors. In light of this success, the brothers designed and implemented discipline-specific mentoring. The 4 tasks of this approach are to introduce the students to career options by using near-peer college mentors who can offer timely advice regarding academics and life, while culturally specific professionals engage with the youth to offer a more long-view perspective on building a career in those options. The multi-generational mentors help retain the students in the career pathways by completing what we call the WISE model for retention. That is, the mentors work alongside the students as they witness issues relevant to their community, investigate the issues from a culturally specific lens and weigh potential solutions, solve or contribute to a solution of the issue using strategies from the discipline that they're pursuing, educate their community about impacts of their efforts. In the end, we want the students to connect work in the discipline with on-the-ground positive impacts in their community. Oh, great. We currently have 2 programs in play. First, there's Grounding Waters, which is an environmental science-focused program originally funded by the EPA via the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and Oregon Department of Education. We have recently received funding from Charlotte Martin Foundation, United Way, and Mentor Graphics to continue the program. The program has a water quality and watershed focus that highlights fisheries with the help of our partners at U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Columbia Slough Watershed Council, Estuary Partnership, Portland Parks and Recreation, and 12 other organizations that help us with on-site learning, restoration activities, wilderness excursions, and even internships. Portland Community College just came on board to offer a training program for our college mentors. I'll run through some of the outcomes of the program in a minute, but first I'll highlight our second program, Constructing Careers. Oh. So there's a little slide out of order here. So Grounding Waters is the program I just spoke about, and I'll switch again to show you Constructing Careers. And Constructing Careers is a green building and civil engineering focused program that's organized similar to Grounding Waters and is slated to start this July should we get word of funding next week. Constructing Careers students also follow the WISE model, but the issues they address have to do with mitigation of environmental threats via green infrastructure. Consequently, the students will start the program by completing a summer program offered at our partners at Constructing Hope, where they will learn skills for the trades. They'll then spend the rest of the year completing green infrastructure projects and restoration activities. For example, the EPA Making a Visible Difference Committee member, Dharma Rain Zen Center, is allowing us to build bioswales and other stormwater retention facilities for their new community meditation center. The students will also engage in job shadowing through Cola's Construction, who happens to have a high school renovation project at Grant High School, where the students will get the opportunity to witness from start to finish that renovation. Here are a few of our outcomes from Grounding Waters. Our graduation rate has maintained at 96%. 46% of our students have secured internships thanks to our partners at Business Education Compact and Portland Parks and Recreation, 2 orgs that we met through the Making a Visible Difference Committee. The image that you see here is of one of the 2 most impactful activities. The students were trained by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to co-teach the salmon in the classroom curriculum at a local elementary and middle schools. Not only did they benefit from serving as experts in the room, but they also benefited the students of color in the class who got to see older students who looked like them performing stewardship. Ultimately, we collaborated with 16 orgs to complete stewardship in their neighborhood that had positive impacts for their watershed. Point 4 is not an exhaustive list, but should give you an idea of what the students have done. Blueprint is also involved in the Portland Making a Visible Difference collaboration, who are working together on a Green Workforce Academy to increase the number of diverse residents who obtain living wage green jobs in Portland. I'll talk next about the development of the Academy, which is connected to Blueprint programs because the intent is for participants in the Green Workforce Academy to also be paid Blueprint mentors in addition to the future job opportunities around the city. The Green Workforce Academy is being pursued by a subgroup of the EPA committee called the Green Workforce Collaborative, or GWC. We seek to identify and develop job opportunities and career pathways in environmental fields for young Black and Native American adults in the greater Portland area, focusing on 4 major industries. That's deconstruction, recycling, waste management, green infrastructure, and urban forestry, and food systems. Given historically low unemployment rates in Portland and the ongoing increase in industry demand for workers in environmental fields, the GWC sees an opportunity to bridge the barriers that communities of color historically and currently face in the environmental sectors. The Academy will be an environmentally focused workforce training, pre-apprenticeship, and complementary education and support services program. Program components include a foundational course that introduces young adults to environmental fields, an employability skills course that teaches young adults soft skills and financial literacy, a series of connector courses that provide young adults with prerequisites needed to enter industry-specific certificate programs, and a near-peer mentoring program where exemplary participants, like I said earlier, are hired as paid near-peer mentors to help high school students learn about careers in environmental stewardship. The GWA will provide program participants with networking resources to connect with local employers seeking to hire qualified entry-level workers. The partner organizations have already initiated relationships with local employers in targeted industry sectors who have expressed interest in hiring young workers of color. The GWA will host networking events attended by both employers and program participants, at which employers will be encouraged to recruit and hire qualified candidates for entry-level jobs. The GWA will then provide targeted follow-up support to both program participants and employers to ensure mutually beneficial working relationships. Our approach is based on 4 principles. 1, culturally specific. That is, we offer holistic trauma-informed wraparound services that reflect the lived experience of our participants. It is cross-sector with input on the development of the program from the public, private, educational, nonprofit, and community-based sectors. We're focused on maintaining an extensive network of employers, educators, trainers, and community organizations seeking to build workforce pipelines through a common equity lens. And finally, it's relationship-based to build the social capital necessary for retention in the field. Our core partners are from the education, green building, and environmental justice realms, including SEI, the Blueprint Foundation, Merrillhurst University, EcoTrust, and the Rebuilding Center. But I want to stress that our success depends on a wide range of collaborators also operating in these realms. Here's a list of organizations that we have reached out to help us embed best practices for culturally specific workforce development in the green sector. You'll notice that many of these collaborators have been mentioned previously as stakeholders in Portland. And here are a few employers with whom we are engaging. This final slide shows the development process, which was made possible by a planning grant from Meyer Memorial Trust. We conducted background research on best practices in culturally specific workforce development throughout North America and engaged in preliminary program design. The GWC has also convened 2 community meetings that have brought together the broad group of stakeholders shown in the previous slide. These community meetings have identified common goals and overlapping priorities, assessed the needs of communities and employers, and discussed key programming elements. The final image on the far right of this diagram represents the coming together of these organizations and alignment of what they currently do toward a shared goal of community-based and culturally sustaining workforce development. Next. I am ready to take if there are any.
Great, thank you. It looks like our question and answer pod is back up, so if all the participants can please refer to that and ask your questions there. We do have a couple of questions here. Would you be able to explain in more detail the program involving raising and releasing salmon?
Oh, sure. So Salmon in the Classroom, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has been doing that program for years. What they do is they go in, they work with teachers at, it used to be elementary schools, but we expanded to one middle school in Portland. And the reason for expanding to that middle school was so that those 8th graders who will be at Roosevelt the following year get to learn about grounding waters and constructing careers, and they can make a decision about joining the program. But essentially what the program entails is the students learn about the salmon life cycle, they learn about fish, about ecology, and then our students come in with fish to dissect. They dissect the fish and they do sort of a map of the anatomy of the fish on large sheets of butcher paper, and then they extract eggs. In the classrooms and in the library of the school, they have aquariums with chillers, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service brings in eggs to put in the aquariums for the students to watch develop. Once the eggs hatch, the students go on a field trip out to the Columbia Gorge to release the juvenile.
Thank you very much. And with that, we'll move on to I think we still have 2 more presentations to go. And like I said, if we don't get to your questions, make sure we ask the presenters and email them out to all of the registrants.
Good afternoon. My name is Allison O'Brien, and I am with the Department of the Interior. And Brian Milchek and I are going to talk a little bit about our dive into the environmental justice pool. And the reason why we titled this presentation Partnering for Progress, Partnerships in Progress, is because really it is a work in progress, and it is moving towards progress. And like so many things in life, there's no red carpet, there's no perfect time to jump in. So we felt like it was a situation of ready, set, collaborate. We're in a fortunate position that we have a tremendous amount of support for working on environmental justice initiatives from our director and deputy director in our office. And so when they brought the charge to us to get involved and see what our office could bring to the table to support environmental justice efforts, we weren't really sure where to go from there. So for the department, many of you are familiar with the Department of the Interior. We have bureaus such as Fish and Wildlife Service, Bureau of Land Management, Park Service, and U.S. Geological Survey. And so we have a tremendous amount of diversity within the department. We also have the Bureau of Indian Affairs. That's very important to bring up. And so some of the themes in environmental justice that resonated with us were the ideas of health and nature. How can we encourage people to be outside? How can we strengthen that connection that people have with their environment? And so we're just going to talk really quickly about our effort here and how we're trying to figure out how we can effectively advocate for this program. So just for a little bit of background, how do I, right there? Okay. So we're with the Office of Environmental Policy and Compliance within DOI. We're the unifying and lead voice for a wide range of environmental issues within the department. We facilitate responsible resource utilization, conservation, and environmental stewardship. Just in terms of organizational structure, we have 4 headquarters teams back in DC, and then we have 8 regional offices, and you'll see they're all located throughout the U.S. And so Brian and I are here in the Portland office, but you guys have a similar office in your area. So back when Executive Order 12898 was signed, it set out to promote non-discrimination in federal programs that affect human health and the environment and provide minority and low-income communities with access to public information and public participation. it created the Environmental Justice Interagency Working Group, which is what this webinar series is a part of. It includes 17 agencies and White House staff to develop partnerships and focus resources. And so here's a little information on the governance structure for the Environmental Justice Interagency Working Group. And now I'm going to turn it over to Brian to talk a little bit more about some specifics within DOI.
Hello. So this is the vision statement for the Department of the Interior's Environmental Justice Strategic Plan. It's to provide it's to provide outstanding management of the natural and cultural resources entrusted to us in a manner that is sustainable, equitable, accessible, and inclusive of all populations. The strategic plan is posted on the Office of Environmental Policy and Compliance's website, and it's intended to improve the internal management of the Department of the Interior by identifying challenges and opportunities for addressing EJ, environmental justice issues in our programs, policies, and activities. It is not intended to be a mechanism that provides direct solutions to environmental justice issues in a particular community. So while most of our programs and activities are not labeled as environmental justice programs, all of our activities should be conducted in a way that does not exclude persons or populations from participating. So for example, some of the actions in which we strive to be inclusive would be planning, permitting, or leasing on DOI lands, providing grants and technical assistance, or any other management of natural and cultural resources. So our goals as presented in the strategic plan are to ensure responsible officials are aware of the executive order and how to apply it, ensure underserved populations have opportunities for meaningful involvement in our decision-making processes, identify and address environmental impacts with potential environmental justice implications, empower underserved populations to build and sustain environmentally and economically sound communities, and pursuant to Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, ensure that financial assistance recipients do not discriminate against environmental justice communities. In order to make progress towards the Department's goals, the Office of Environmental Policy and Compliance has developed an environmental justice training to increase employees' awareness of the federal government's requirement to incorporate principles of environmental justice into any programs, policies, and activities that may adversely impact human health or the environment. We've also developed internal policies that require documentation of potential effects of our activities on environmental justice communities, and we also put together annual reports on our progress made in carrying out our strategic plan and the executive order. We've also entered into a memorandum of understanding with the EPA to support the implementation of the College and Underserved Community Partnership Program initiative, in which agencies facilitate partnerships between schools and communities to do environmental justice work. The idea is to work with colleges and universities to develop projects that match up well with their curricula and fulfill a need for a local community, so that students can help complete a community project while getting real-life work experience and college credit. The program manager, Mike Burns, is on detail to the Department of the Interior now, and he's working with us to identify projects that have nexuses with our Bureau's missions and programs, and he's going to talk more about the program in the next presentation.
Thank you, Brian.
Oh, 1 second. Sorry, Mike. I've got another slide. At the regional level, in the Pacific Northwest, OEPC has worked to identify regional contacts with the Department's bureaus that have roles related to environmental justice. And we've started having regular conference calls as a regional DOI-EJ working group. The purpose of the group is to help share information and best practices across the bureaus and to identify any potential opportunities to improve EJ-related projects by working across the bureaus or with other agencies and organizations. Right now, we're in the process of brainstorming for project ideas that would fit into the CUP program. Allison and I have also started attending meetings with the Portland community partners who are on the webinar speaking today to try to see where the department's mission areas overlap with local efforts and figure out where we can build partnerships. So we're making multiple connections on multiple fronts, and we're very grateful to the speakers today and Mary Lou for showing us the work that can be done where the rubber meets the road as we continue to kind of explore our roles in this field. And I think that's it for us. If we can move on to questions.
Or we can kick it straight.
Or we can just go straight to Mike's presentation.
I think in the interest of time, let's go ahead and go with Mike's presentation, and then if everyone can please type your questions into the question and answer box, we will to export those questions and get them answered and then send them out via email.
Okay, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Burns. I work for the USCPA in Region 4 in Atlanta, Georgia, but I'm currently on detail to the Department of Interior to inculcate the CUP program into all the bureaus and agencies and offices in the Department of Interior. So I know we're running short on time. I'll go through these slides fairly quickly. So, okay, so briefly, the program started when I came on detail to the EPA from the National Park Service in August 2011. The intent of the program and the cornerstone of the program was the understanding that poor, underserved communities can't get access to the resources that the larger cities can because they don't have the technical expertise that they need to be able to do it. You know, they have a bad sewer plant, but they can't identify what's wrong with it. They know they need economic development, but they can't afford to put together an economic development plan, things of that nature. So the intent was to be able to use colleges and universities to provide that technical assistance to underserved communities based on the issues that they identified, because we know all those issues, when you add them up together, those are the issues that fit within the mission area of all the federal agencies. So, but the other thing we wanted to be able to do was get the colleges to provide this assistance on a voluntary basis. So we reached out to the colleges and got them to understand that not all value was monetary, that there was an opportunity for them to provide a unique experiential learning opportunity to their students, not working for a corporation or a company, which I'm not saying that's negative, but this was an opportunity where they could actually take what they learned in the classroom, put it to work in communities, and the work that they were doing was making a significant difference in the communities they were helping. It was actually making a difference in the place where they were doing the work. So the advantage of having the schools do it voluntarily is because, you know, if it doesn't take money to get the schools engaged in the program, then the lack of money doesn't make them go away, and you can build long-term partnerships, because at the end of the day, communities don't need something for, 3 months or 6 months or a year. They didn't get in their situation overnight, and they're not going to get out of it overnight, so they need long-term partners, and by having the schools volunteer, we've been able to do that. All the schools that have participated in the program for an academic year, they have stuck and stayed. So we have had schools that have been part of the program 3.5 years, and continue to assist wherever we ask them to assist. So this allows the federal government to be able to expand the support we can give to underserved communities, but because the colleges are doing the heavy lifting, we don't have to expand our staff to be able to do that. It took 18 months to get the first school on board. That was in the spring of 2013. We're now up to, it's actually 65 schools in 22 states. That includes a collaboration with Oxford University in London, England. And we've got tribal schools, historically black colleges, the largest Hispanic school in the country, majority schools, large public schools, private schools, and community colleges. So we work with students across the board. And we've got, in addition to a nationwide agreement with the Department of Interior, we have one with the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Energy, and we also have working partners with the Union of Concerned Scientists and the American Geophysics Union. We've actually collaborated with them on projects. So Our projects have been in 46 different cities and communities. We're actually up to 93 projects that have impacted almost 750,000 citizens, and we provide about $9 million worth of value to communities. And again, this support has come voluntarily. So I talk about the support that we can talk to tribes, and specifically I wanted to talk about one in particular. San Juan Community College is in Farmington, New Mexico, which is the fastest shrinking city in the country. They wanted to be able to provide something to their community to be an impetus to economic development. They wanted to create a maker space which gives people a place to develop high-tech, mid-tech, and low-tech solutions, but they didn't have the ability to put that together. So we built a collaboration with Drexel University, which is 2,000 miles away in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and they have a capstone project with Philadelphia where they are going to design this makerspace for San Juan for free. So they're going to get this design fund for free. That gives San Juan the ability to identify partners to help fund it. So that means they'll be able to put together something that will give an opportunity to a wide range of citizens in Farmington to actually develop their own business and economic development projects or ideas to help that city move forward. And we've also done one in Valley de Oro, which is a wildlife refuge, urban wildlife refuge. We wanted to be able to tell that story. We, the federal government, couldn't find a way to get that done, but we had a tribal school actually agree to build this story from scratch. So they're developing the storyboards, they're building a video, they're going to do video blogs, and they're going to do a fantastic job of putting that story together so that everybody can understand the importance of working with communities to help preserve the land around their communities. So, just briefly, the pictures, I know I'm over. There's some great pictures in the back. The first set of pictures is about an altered transportation plan and building a food garden. The second one was where students are working in communities to help train people about dealing with, racial, gender bias, using a solar cell to dewater sewage sludge, teaching citizens the importance of natural resource projects and helping design the projects, using students to help identify river erosion against the foundations of the Edmund Pettus Bridge, which was a national monument, and then working with a mayor to help design the brand new city hall, but not only design it, but make it completely sustainable, use of solar cells, green pavers, all those things that will make it green, which at the end of the day helps that mayor save money because the less money she uses on utilities, the more she can use in her budget on other things. And we've done projects across the board like that. The last page is, this page is on the right, is a pilot agriculture project that was done that was so successful. They made so much produce that they ended up selling the excess off of roadside stands and made thousands of dollars just selling the excess off of roadside stands. And on the right is a picture of Community Day in Valley de Oro where they're going to build that story to talk about how so important it is to work with communities to help preserve the land in and around those communities. So, it's as quick as I could do it. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about the program, and if anybody has any questions, my information is on the last page. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. And I know we're over for the webinar, but we are going to stay on the line for just a few more minutes in order to provide wrap-up information and answer a few questions. Like I had mentioned before, please feel free to type all your questions into the question and answer box, and we will be sure to download those and get them answered and then email them out to all the participants. So before everyone signs off, could we please answer this question, which could be for any of the participants, or sorry, any of our speakers. What kind of strategies do you recommend to seek public funding for any of the types of projects talked about today, recognizing that EJ communities are often overlooked for public investment?
Okay, so this is Mary Lou with EPA. I'll take a crack at that question, at answering that question, and then other people can jump in. So I think one of the things, and I learned this in another work effort I did, is that when you bring people together, and a lot of the folks on the phone, a couple folks that we brought together knew each other prior, but not everybody knew each other, and it's amazing the opportunities that come out of that conversation. And here's an example. Duran Coles talked about the Meyer Memorial Trust. Well, so that's a local foundation. They found out about our work. They approached me and they said, we have some funding. What's an area that we can support? And that's how the Green Academy got some initial funding and hopefully a much larger amount in the future. I think also we find out that there's grant opportunities. When we share information, we share information on grant opportunities, and folks have the ability to apply for grants. We also have partnerships that can be used as a part of grant applications. So I think it's just the collaboration, the connection, and the networking that really allows opportunities to emerge that might not emerge without that collaboration. So that's my best answer for that.
Yeah, this is Mike Burns. I just would say one thing. There are lots of resources out there. The problem for underserved communities is they're not in a position to compete. They don't have the technical support. They don't have the skills. They don't have the grant writing, skills that the larger municipalities or organizations do. So it was one of the reasons we created the program. So I would say it's really important to find ways to provide those underserved communities with the technical support they need to identify, shape, and create the projects, and then help them find the ways to provide the grant writing skills, which so many of them don't have, so that they at least have the opportunity to compete for the same resources everybody else does.
Thank you very much, team. And those remaining on the webinar, I know we ran a little bit over today. We will be sure to get all of your questions answered and then send out all the answers to the questions to those who registered for today's webinar. I'd like to remind everyone that they can download each presentation today in the resources and materials section of the webinar room. The first file has the first presentations, and then the last two are the last two that you just heard. You could also look into the notes section to see all the contact information for our presenters today. I want to thank everyone for joining us on today's webinar, and invite you all to please join us again in September after we take a short summer break. The Access and Awareness webinar series will be returning in September with a webinar about the youth perspective on environmental justice. So thank you to all of our presenters, and thank you to those who joined us today. We'll see you in September.
The leader has disconnected. The conference will be terminated in 5 minutes.